Hello, and welcome to Remember the Film, the podcast where we may not do everything great in our lives, but we're good at this. I'm Jeff Grizz Ulrich, and joining me once again is Josh Bradley and Hugo Panay. How are you guys doing today?
Doing good. Excited to talk about some food.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, I'm hungry. I'm hungry to talk about food.
Yeah, because and the time we record is sort of before my dinner time, so I'm going to get progressively hungrier as we talk about this movie.
And I even haven't had breakfast yet.
Me
So
either.
there you go.
And it's lunchtime for me.
You should go with breakfast, dude. Yeah. What are you doing, man? It's the important way of the day.
I slept in. What are you going to do? But yeah, so this week we are talking about Chef, the 2014 movie directed by Jon Favreau. And this was a passion project of his, so we're going to talk a little bit about Jon Favreau, and then we're going to dive
his
in
passions.
And his passions, and we're going to dive into the movie. So Jon Favreau, a prolific actor, just hundreds of acting credits, but also a very active producer and director. So I wanted to ask, what do you guys think of him as an actor versus what do you think of him as a director? We'll start with Josh.
I guess I don't have like a huge opinion of him as an actor, just because like I've seen Swingers, and then I've seen him in bit parts, and that's about it. Mm-hmm. And I guess he's definitely the lead character of this. I really enjoy him as an actor. I think he's really funny. He kind of just pops up in a lot of comedies I really like. Like he pops up in I Love You Man, for example.
Yeah.
Which is a movie I really, really enjoy, and I really enjoy his character. As a director, I guess we can talk about him as. I think we have more on the outline him as a director later. But I enjoy him as an actor, and I enjoy him as a director for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
The same for you, Hugo?
Yeah, pretty much the same. Like I think. Yeah, he's the kind of actor who he pops up in a movie and you're like, oh, that's cool. There's a scene with Jon Favreau. I like him.
He almost always puts a smile on my face.
Yeah, agreed.
When he shows up in a movie.
I don't think any movie is worse because Jon Favreau is in it, and he usually just brings a fun vibe to it. Like there's a few, one scene where he's in The Wolf of Wall Street, and I'm always like, Jon Favreau was in this. I was like,
when I saw
that's
that,
fun.
That's right, you're in this.
That's cool.
And every time I watch Elf with someone, I just cannot help myself point out the director cameo. I'm like, that's Jon Favreau. He plays the doctor. He plays the doctor that inspects Buddy, James Caan's doctor. That's him.
Yeah. And as a director, I guess he's made some movies that I really like, and also some movies that aren't considered very good. So he's a bit up and down. But I mean, lately I think he's only been directing stuff that's pretty.
Well, so
good,
so that was my next question: is what films that he's directed have you guys seen?
Yeah, I've seen both Iron Mans, I've seen Chef, obviously, and I've seen Elf. And I think I saw the first half of Cowboys vs. Aliens, and I was like, I don't need to finish this, honestly. Yeah.
I think that's it for me too. I've seen the first two Iron Mans. I've seen Chef. I've seen Elf many, many times. I've seen the first few episodes of The Mandalorian that he directed, and but I haven't seen. I haven't seen Cowboys vs. Aliens. I haven't seen the other two big ones, which are Jungle Book and The Lion King, live action quote unquote remakes.
Yeah. So I've seen his Iron Man movies and Lion King and Jungle Book, and Chef and Elf. But it was of the other three that he's directed, which is Zathura, Cowboys and Aliens, and Made. I think the only one I might even have a remote interest in seeing is Zathura, honestly. And
what the hell's Made?
Apparently it's a movie he directed.
All right. I at least remember Zathura coming out.
Yeah.
Like I remember seeing advertisements for that, and obviously we all remember Cowboys, or maybe we don't, but Cowboys vs. Aliens was a big a memed movie before memes was basically Cowboys vs. Aliens.
It's the kind of movie that I remember seeing trailers for, and I was like,
exactly. Yeah, that's correct.
And stuff. Like, okay.
Daniel Craig is in that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Harrison Ford and Daniel Craig in a movie directed by Jon Favreau.
Olivia Wilde,
Sounds
Sam
good.
Rockwell, Paul Dano. Like the cast is great.
And the biggest thing people said about that movie was, "That's really the title you're going to go with." Really?
Yeah.
Okay. That was that's the cultural footprint that movie has.
The only reason I am intrigued by Zathura is because I'm pretty sure it was like sci-fi Jumanji, right?
I think that sounds
the
right.
basic premise of that. So
I
like Jumanji.
I love Jumanji, man.
I'm looking at this letterboxd page. There's a Zathura. I can't say that with my accent. Sorry. And I think I might have seen this. I don't remember it at all, but I remember this house going into space and stuff. I think I've seen this, but I don't really remember it.
And I was just looking at it. Made is a Vince Vaughn, Jon Favreau. Like, I guess it's a crime movie.
Yeah.
Well, the next thing you have on the outline is, are there any common threads between things he has worked on? And I think the common thread's probably Vince Vaughn is the only one thing that I can think of.
Yeah, done a lot of work with Vince Vaughn. And then, I mean, since Iron Man, he's had the common thread of Robert Downey Jr. and then Iron Man 2, Scarlett Johansson, and now
Disney, and billions of dollars
and
is
billions
the common
of dollars,
theme
the other
in
common
his most recent.
Yeah, I think outside of Chef, he's pretty much worked with Disney almost exclusively at this point.
If we're going to talk about Jon Favreau, I feel like we need to start with Swingers. Have you guys seen Swingers?
I have not seen Swingers.
I've not seen.
Obviously, I'm aware of
familiar?
it. Obviously, yeah.
Okay,
I'm familiar with it for sure.
Hugo, are you familiar with Swingers?
I'm not really. I've heard it, but
okay. So it came out in '96, I want to say, and I think Doug Liman directed it, but Jon Favreau wrote it, and he was like a struggling actor in LA, and so he basically wrote a script that he could be in, because that's how the '90s worked, I guess.
Classic.
And it's low budget, but it's really fun, and it's him and Vince Vaughn as just like two guys in Los Angeles. It's kind of semi-autobiographical, and Jon Favreau is kind of like a sad sack in love, and it's kind of just like, it's kind of episodic. Like they go to Vegas and they go out to various bars. It's pretty it's pretty 90s-y, but like it's really enjoyable, and there's a few quotes that endure from that. Number one being Vegas baby.
Yeah.
And number two being you're so money you don't even know how money you are. Really a star-making turn for Vince Vaughn. That's like, I think the legacy of Swingers is Vince Vaughn came out of that just a man on fire, and his career took off after that. But like that's what also gave us Jon Favreau too. That kind of put him on the map in a different kind of way as well. It's good. I recommend it.
Yeah, and so like we talked about, he's done a lot of stuff with Vince Vaughn, going all the way back to Rudy.
Which,
we've already talked about.
Predates Swingers. Yeah, predates Swingers.
Now, they weren't in any scenes together in Rudy, so I don't even know if they had any like time to actually get to know each other on set for that. But
because Swingers exists, I would assume they would have had to have had some interaction on set.
Right, they had
or
to
like
be.
Or they were just friends before that movie, independent of Rudy. But like, you don't make Swingers if those two aren't friends. I think so. They probably hung out at some point.
But obviously, Rudy means a lot to me and Josh, and Hugo puts up with it. So
so Notre Dame lost yesterday. Is that the first loss since we've been doing this podcast? At least in the regular season, because we lost in the ACC title game.
I think it's the first regular
season
loss. Yeah, since we started the podcast.
It's
also
Hugo.
The first regular season loss since 2017 at home.
To those not watching the video, Hugo just took off his headphones and got up because we're talking about
because he does not
college
care.
football, American football. Yeah,
I have nothing to contribute to this conversation, so just like
as we already referenced, Jon Favreau has done a lot of big budget movies and TV shows here recently. So the question I wanted to ask is, where do you see his directing career going from where he is now? Because he's done, just a bunch of Marvel stuff, a bunch of Disney live action remakes, and then Chef was worked in here.
Yeah.
So I think, not to be glib, but what does Jon Favreau do next? The answer is whatever he wants.
Yep.
Yes,
that's
for sure.
I think.
I was just going to say that.
So not to reference other podcasts, there's a podcast I really enjoy called Blank Check. And the premise is, it's a very popular podcast. Premise is these two guys go through the filmographies of directors who had massive success early on, and then are issued a series of blank checks to make whatever crazy passion projects they want. And I was messaging you guys earlier this week about Zemeckis, because I'm listening to the Zemeckis episodes. Jon Favreau has blank checks for the rest of his life now, because he made Iron Man. He is a major executive producer in the MCU. He kicked off this live action trend for Disney that's making them billions and billions of dollars, and now he's also like the shepherd of the next generation of Star Wars.
Yeah.
So
it's at least
you can't really
sure.
You can't really. I think it's hard to overstate his impact on culture in the last decade and a half, and moving forward, he can do no wrong. And whenever he wants to make another Chef, which is another small scale passion project, people will be falling over themselves to write checks for him.
And so that was my question about that, though, is where is he going to find the time to do these passion projects?
I think wherever he wants, because a movie like Chef probably doesn't take that much time. Like I don't know if working on The Mandalorian means he doesn't have time to direct a smaller movie. Like directors are very workaholic people. I feel like if he wants, I feel like if he wants to do smaller projects in between all the big stuff that he's doing, he could find a way to do it. And I'm sure Disney would be totally fine with throwing 15 million at him to do a smaller thing.
Yeah,
which in today's day and age is like nothing for them.
And the thing is, like, Jon Favreau, we'll talk a little bit more about this, about his quality as a director, but one thing is for sure that he is very passionate about everything he works on. Like, there are directors that you see the behind-the-scenes stuff, and it doesn't actually seem like they're that interested in the movie they're making. Jon Favreau, like, when you see the behind-the-scenes stuff for all the Marvel stuff he's worked on, the behind-the-scenes stuff for The Mandalorian, and then stuff I read about for Chef here, he 100% throws himself into these movies and is, like, really dedicates, everything he's got.
Yeah, and like, considering that he's making, with Marvel, I won't say he's a director for hire, because at this point he's sort of a big deal within Disney, but he's making projects based on giant IPs, and he's still like, he always seems to really throw himself at it with everything that he's got, at least, which is fun. Like, even with The Lion King, which is a project that, a lot of people didn't really like, and maybe that it didn't really pan out in terms of the critical reception of it. If you see the videos of him, like, going into these blank rooms with all the technology, he seems so passionate about trying to make this crazy fake live action thing, and
that takes a lot of vision.
One of those, even though it's like one of those projects that, from the outside, if you look at it from a critical point of view, is like, oh, why are we doing this? Like, it doesn't. But to him, I guess there's something in it that he cares about always.
I mean, I don't think anyone could see that new Lion King and not recognize the technical achievement.
Yeah, exactly. And like, again, as we were talking before, Jon Favreau doesn't have to direct the live action Lion King. Like, they could have found somebody else who wanted to do that, and the movie would have made whatever it made,
probably about the same amount of money
that it made anyway. But somehow he seems to give a shit about that stuff. So I don't know. I like him. I like that fact that he's passionate even for stuff that maybe I'm not that into.
So the next question I had is he a great director, or just a good director, or just a consistent director? Like does he have like a bare minimum, like, this is how much quality you're going to get with Jon Favreau directing a film and that's good enough? Or is he actually a great director?
I think he's good. I don't think his directorial vision necessarily shines through with his project so much. I think maybe sometimes, like in Chef, I feel like a lot of what's great about Chef is in the writing, and I guess that's part of directing too. But since he worked on the writing as well, I feel like I think that the writing of the movie is the big deal about the movie. I think the directing is good, but not, I don't know, anything to write home about, if you know what I mean.
Josh?
First of all, I don't think I'm in any position to say that Jon Favreau is or isn't a good director, because I think
exactly.
the product speaks for itself and the results speak for themselves to some extent.
Yeah. But you can have an opinion, okay, compare him to Quentin Tarantino. Like, we all agree Quentin Tarantino's a great director.
That was kind of a disclaimer, I guess, is what I'm building to. I've never watched a Jon Favreau movie and thought, wow, that was like really well directed, or even watched a Jon Favreau movie and thought, I can tell Jon Favreau did this. Like,
yes.
He doesn't have. There's nothing. The distinct parts of Jon Favreau's filmography is the IP, not necessarily what's on screen and what I'm watching.
There's no Favreau style that just comes across in every movie. And you look at all the movies he's done, it's very clear he's a very versatile director, because he's taking on lots of different styles.
I can't say that he's not a great director just because he doesn't have a recognizable style, because he puts a consistent product up there that make billions of dollars, several times over. But yeah, like, I guess I don't really have like a strong opinion of him as a director, besides to say that he's clearly good at it, because people keep handing him these products and he keeps knocking them out of the park. So
I don't think you
doing something right.
You don't hand someone an IP like Star Wars without having a little faith in their capabilities.
not only do you hand them something like Star Wars, but you build the launch of your extremely important streaming service on the debut of that show, which is what Disney Plus was built around the release of The Mandalorian. They put a ton of faith in that. I assume they saw the product before they decided to build the release of their streaming platform off of it, but still, the fact that they had the confidence to do that is very telling.
The last question I have just on our Jon Favreau segment here is, how do you feel about him acting in basically every movie he directs? And I know he's not the only director who does cameos or does bit parts in their movies, but has there been a movie that Favreau has directed that he is not also in at all?
Well, I haven't seen Made.
I haven't. So no, he's like the co-lead in Made.
Okay, right. I don't know if he acts in Lion King and Jungle Book, but whatever. But regardless, I think it's fun. Again, I really like his presence on screen, and I think where maybe his directing doesn't have as much that is definitely recognizable as his. I think his presence in the movie is felt and is. He does have a unique sort of vibe and fun persona to him that whenever he shows up in his movies, it's cool. Then it's as I said before, it's always fun when he shows up, so it's good.
I actually think it should be a requirement that every director has to appear in their own movie at some point. Every movie that every director makes, they have to appear in a cameo at
least
point.
A cameo.
Yes, that should be a new rule.
So that you can go, oh, that's the director.
But you have to make them as fun as Martin Scorsese does, because his are the best ones.
I've already pointed out how much that I like him dropping into Elf, and every director should do it always.
And I did confirm he is in Jungle Book. I don't know which role he was not in. He was not in the Lion King remake, but he's in a lot of his own movies.
Hold on, Grizz. Before we move on, what do you think of Jon Favreau as director? Did you give your opinion?
No. I guess I forgot to say. Well, I kind of referenced it. I think he's incredibly versatile. Because there's no way that you can tackle the Iron Man movies and Elf, which is completely. I mean, they're both funny movies, but they're completely different settings and styles and everything there. Chef is very much a low-budget indie kind of feel to it, which is, again, completely different from everything else. And then the CG animal movies, again, requires another like we talked about his vision. I think he's got a lot of talent. I do kind of wish that he would develop some sort of style that I could see from movie to movie, because I want to like him so much, and I want to be able to say he's a great director. And I just feel like you don't get into those conversations of great directors unless you have an identifiable mark for your movies. So I want that for him. I don't need that from him. But I do really like Jon Favreau as director. Elf is one of my all-time favorite Christmas movies. I think we talked about that when we talked about Christmas movies.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So, ever since Elf, I've been like, I want Jon Favreau to just kill it. Do it, man. But
he's done it. He's done it. He's doing all right. I think he's doing all right.
Yeah, he can't complain. Okay, well, so now we're going to get into the main topic of our show, our film to remember for this week, Chef. The boilerplate stuff that we always do to kick it off. This movie premiered March 7th, 2014 at South by Southwest, and then released nationwide later on May 30th, 2014. I wanted to shout out the premiere at South by Southwest because that, of course, takes place in Austin, Texas, which was a prominent set piece of this movie. So, very,
I'm
very
sure they
fitting.
loved it there.
They're like, oh, I've been there. But yeah, the budget of this movie, as we talked about, was much lower than everything else that Jon Favreau has worked on. Budget of $11 million. Of course, that only corresponded to $48 million gross worldwide, which is not a huge success. But
good enough. I think it's all right for the budget.
It's really not bad for the budget. And then the reason I wanted to mention that is because one of the things we're trying to focus on with our show here are good movies that may have been slightly overlooked. And I think you can see from that sort of, gross that Chef did not get the wide renown when it came out. What you got, Josh?
Does anyone care what the top 5 box office was the weekend this came out?
I always care, Josh.
Yes,
always.
That's always fun. Hit me.
Number 1, Neighbors, coming in for its opening weekend. Number 1. That made $49 million opening weekend. Neighbors. I've not seen
that. Would
Neighbors.
Not happen today. Yeah, I've seen it. It's fine.
The Seth Rogen.
Seth Rogen.
What's that dude's name? Zac Efron. That's it.
Zac Efron.
Number 2, coming in at $35 million in its second week, The Amazing Spider-Man 2.
Oh God!
A Spider-Man movie making only $35 million in its second week is
bad.
That's the sign that the wheels are falling off, and that's why they didn't make an Amazing Spider-Man 3. I think
that movie is dog shit.
They had someone else playing Spider-Man within 2 years of this happening. I'm pretty sure. So that's how that happens.
Yeah.
Number 3 is this? Number 3 is The Other Woman, which is that the comedy with like Leslie Mann, Leslie Mann, Cameron Diaz, and I believe Kate Upton is the third lead in The Other Woman.
Big week for comedies here.
Yeah. I mean, that's in its third week. It's still coming in with $9 million.
I remember this movie. I've seen this movie.
Number 4 is one of the how to put this, Christian dramas that come out every year or two that do incredible box office numbers because
that's why they keep
churches just buy out theaters so their congregation can go see it, and they just are guaranteed a certain threshold of the box office. This one's called Heaven is for Real, which I think was one of the more successful of these types of movies. And then number 5, the 6th week of a little movie called Captain America Winter Soldier.
Oh,
coming in at $5.7 million, and I don't see Chef debuted to number 28.
Yeah,
I mean it was only on 6 screens, but it only made $200,000. It's tough, tough beat.
Point is, a lot of people probably didn't even get the chance to know that Chef existed.
I didn't hear about it until way later. I don't think.
Same here. It was years later.
Here's the thing. This feels like this just I realized it was released in theaters. It was made by Open Road. I get that, but like it just feels like a movie that's a Netflix original.
Yeah.
First of all,
absolutely.
it feels like a Netflix original in size and scope, and the fact that there's like some really 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 famous people that only appear in like a scene or two. You see that a lot on Netflix, where like then they'll use like Dustin Hoffman's face on the poster when you're scrolling through Netflix to try to entice
like,
do whatever.
Dustin Hoffman, yeah, let's watch.
Oh my God, Robert Downey Jr. Oh my God, Scarlett Johansson, Dustin Hoffman. Holy crap! But and also like the fact that like it's perpetually on Netflix, even though it's not a Netflix movie. Like I don't think it's left Netflix in like 4 years.
It definitely hasn't, and I think that's because of the deal that they made for the Chef show, which Jon Favreau created after this movie, which is just him cooking with his friends on.
Yes.
So I think that's why it's probably like I wouldn't be surprised if that was in the contract for the Chef show, that Chef has to be on Netflix the whole time that show's running.
Yeah. I mean,
it's also the kind of movie where I think benefits a lot from word of mouth after the theatrical release, where it's like, oh,
totally.
Did you see that fun movie Jon Favreau made and Sofia Vergara is in it from Modern Family? That was a fun movie. You should check it out. Like, and it's also the kind of movie that you're like, oh yeah, I don't have to see this in theaters. Maybe I could wait when it's on Netflix. So I get how it wouldn't have made a lot of money at the box office. Maybe.
Yeah, and word of mouth is key for. I mean, that's true for basically all low budget indie movies. That word of mouth is how those movies become relevant. So
yeah.
So fortunately, I did hear about this movie eventually, and I watched it, and I immediately it resonated with me from the start. I really loved this movie. The idea for the movie came from Favreau wanting to tell a story about a celebrity chef, and also in part because Favreau is also a child of divorce, and so he brought that aspect into the narrative of the movie. And I also see Josh pointed out that he, after having done the Iron Man movies, he had wanted to return to a simpler, low-budget filmmaking style. So he wrote about a guy returning to a low-budget, simpler cooking style, which is, very, very clever. So it's Favreau. I mean, it makes sense that he's the lead actor because he really put himself into the movie.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just read directly from the Wikipedia page. The script was semi-autobiographical, incorporating parts of Favreau's life into the main character, such as being a father while having a busy career and coming from a broken home. Favreau also drew comparison between his career as a director and Carl's career as a chef. He stepped down from directing major studio films to go back to basics and create Chef on a smaller budget, much like Carl's resignation from a popular restaurant to work in a food truck. I eat that shit up, man. Whenever like a movie is kind of like commenting on itself and like being all meta like that, I eat that shit up. So I wanted to comment on that.
Well, and like we were talking about how much I want there to be a signature Favreau style. if he does another movie in this same sort of similar vein, I think that's where you could start to see that sort of thing, because he puts so much of himself in this movie. If he does that in other movies as well, you might start to see some real through lines.
You guys are familiar with the concept of one for them, one for me, right?
Yes, of course.
Yep. This is maybe the ultimate one for me movie. And normally, like, one for me's not necessarily that good, but like this is very good. I don't mean it in that sense, but like he did one for them and like was incredibly successful. So like obviously they're going to give him whatever he wants to make the one for me.
Yeah.
And so this is like the ultimate personal. It's kind of about me. It's low budget. It's a scale far below anything else I do. But like this is like one for me, and like I hope it makes more of these. Yeah, like you just said.
If there's anything that we could say is sort of a through line with the movies that he's directed, at least the ones that I've seen, is maybe like strained relationship with fathers that maybe sort of gets some resolution eventually. Like you can definitely see how, you know, as Joshua said, him being in, you know, quote unquote a broken home or childhood divorce or whatever influenced this movie. But, you know, in Iron Man 1 and 2, the relationship with his father is sort of a big
obviously
engine
Elf
of that story. Elf.
Oh
but
my God, yeah.
I mean,
Clearly,
I guess to
Elf.
some extent, The Lion King has some
Absolutely.
father-son
There's
stuff.
some daddy
so it's
issues.
like-
and
There's some
and the
daddy-
Jungle Book
and the Jungle Book. So, like, maybe I guess that's one of the through lines that you can throw.
and the Mandalorian to some extent. Actually.
Yeah,
Now that-
we've
Hugo,
discovered
you just cracked the code, man.
the code,
There you
buddy.
go. We did it. We did it. But I'm gonna go check out if Maid has
We did it, Joe.
some father-son relationship.
But yeah, so that's you know, he very clearly puts himself into this movie, and that's one of the highlights for me for this film. The other main highlight for me from this is how much preparation went into this movie for Favreau. He trained with Chef Roy Choi. I'm not positive on pronunciation, but
That sounds right.
who Roy Choi had, in addition to working in restaurants, you know, for many years, had also created a super popular food truck, Koji, which is like a Korean taco truck deal.
God, sounds good.
And it is extremely popular, and it has been, people have tried to replicate it. Like there's Korean taco trucks that I go to here in my area that are taking direct inspiration from his truck. But Chef Choi consulted on the film to teach the actors the proper techniques so that they can show when they're preparing the food that it's like this is actually how it'd be prepared, including the plating and, you know, how they talk about the food, and so that really comes across to me in every scene in which they're cooking. All the characters seem equally knowledgeable and passionate about cooking, which
You can tell Favreau himself loves food, and I think he's bringing. I think it's not a coincidence that he chose to do this, but I totally agree with that part being a highlight of the movie for me, because like anytime you could see that it was actually him doing the cooking, I felt it felt really good. There's something so satisfying about actors doing things that maybe they're not generally able to do in real life just because they were able to train for that movie.
well, you can almost see
really
him
satisfying.
smile. You can almost see him smile every time he's
It's like,
cooking.
look
and
how
it's like,
cool
I
I
really
am,
think
I'm
that's
doing
Jon
this.
Favreau smiling.
Much like a few weeks ago when I had Mulholland Drive on, I have Chef on mute in front of me right now, and there's just a scene that I completely forgot about, which is in the first act where he cooks for Scarlett Johansson in his bedroom, and presumably they either just had sex or are about to have sex, and it's very clearly tying sex to cooking for someone, and the way she lustily watches him cook.
Yeah,
that I think gives you an idea of what Jon Favreau thinks of cooking, and thinks like about the process of cooking. I think.
Also, do you remember that scene when he makes the most awesome looking grilled cheese sandwich you've ever seen in your life?
Yeah,
I do.
And his son is just like, he takes a bite. Oh yeah, this is good. And he's like,
So shut up, kid.
you appreciate this man.
This is
up, kid.
amazing.
I mean, 100%. Like how I first found out about this movie was there's a YouTube channel called Good Mythical Morning, and they have a chef, the mythical chef Josh, and he talked about in a video this movie as like as the quintessential cooking movie, like that this is people who are really passionate about cooking. This most parallels that for most people. So that's how I first got into it, was because if people who are like actual chefs, and mythical chef Josh is not like, he's not a trained chef, but like he's really into it, and he wasn't the only person. Binging with Babish is another popular YouTube channel, another cooking channel, and he also did an episode where he replicates the grilled cheese sandwich from Chef. It's so like, good. I mean, the fact that these diehard cooking aficionados like love this movie really adds to my value that I take from this. Continue the preparation stuff. Favreau went to culinary school in the lead up to production at the request of Chef Choi, so that he would learn the stuff, so that he would be able to act it out authentically. And then Favreau, like we already talked about this, enjoyed working with Choi so much that they went on to make the Chef Show on Netflix, which I don't know if have you guys watched any of that?
I haven't, but I've been meaning to, because I feel like I would like that.
What's up, Josh?
I haven't watched it, but I have seen a very, very, very famous clip from it where Gwyneth Paltrow admits she doesn't know what Marvel movie she's in. Do you remember that?
Yeah, that was really funny.
Yeah.
I wasn't in Avengers. We were in Spider-Man together. No, we were in Avengers together too.
But this show is like, especially in the first few episodes of it, it really just feels like Jon Favreau's like, I really want to cook today. You know what? Let's turn on a camera. And then that was the show.
Yeah.
Because it's like,
that sounds good.
It's really like guerrilla style. It's just like him and Chef Choi, or him and some friends cooking something, or going to a restaurant and begging the chef to let them come back into the kitchen and watch them prepare food. It's very much like, let's see if we can make a cooking show today. And I really, really love it. So highly recommend that, especially if you enjoyed the food aspects of this movie.
It feels like there were a few scenes in this that they were almost kind of breaking the fourth wall. Like when he drives through the country, there are times where he stops at places where, you have to try this specific thing that they cook at this restaurant. And it almost felt like those people weren't even actors, and like they were just going to this famous restaurant and making that.
When they go to Austin, Aaron Franklin, that is his restaurant. He was not an actor.
Okay, so I got that right. Yeah,
you're right.
Those scenes were really fun. Those scenes are really fun for me as well.
But yeah, so why are we discussing this movie? Well, we talked about it earlier. Was that we're trying to find movies that we love that maybe didn't get enough attention when they first came out, and so that's what made me like. I got to pick the movie this week, and that's why I wanted to do this one, because I was thinking about what's a great feel-good movie that is just not enough people have heard about, and so
now it's talked about. Yeah,
that's why we're talking about this. Had any of you guys seen this before?
I have. Yeah, I saw this. I think in like 2015 or 16. I definitely didn't see it when it came out. I'm not even sure I was aware of it when it came out, but I caught it on Netflix because it's been on Netflix for in perpetuity. It feels like. Yeah, I probably saw it. I don't know, probably 2016. I think.
I did not remember having seen this, but then while I was watching this, I realized, I've seen this before. Because I remembered the ending, like I remembered the final scenes, so I had seen it before, yeah.
Okay, so we're just going to do, instead of going through the entire plot, I'm just going to kind of go through some bullet points from the plot, like kind of in order, but that way we're not just rehashing the entire movie. So the movie begins, the main event at the beginning of the movie is that Chef Carl Casper is going to be reviewed by this famous food blogger has a huge following, and the restaurant's owner, played by Dustin Hoffman, basically convinces him that he has to serve his traditional menu because that's what people expect, and he does that, and the review does not go well. He gets absolutely torn apart and eviscerated. What do you guys think in these opening sequences with the review, and particularly his relationship with Dustin Hoffman's character Reva,
I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I love every scene in this movie where they go shopping for food. I find those extremely exciting, and maybe because just I like that. I really enjoy finding like some really good food and trying to make a dish that I've never made before. I find that fun. I do that with my girlfriend sometimes, and just seeing, an expert chef in this is fictional, but still going to a market and, look at these radishes, look at how good these look, and then just coming up with this fun menu, and then all of his dreams get completely shattered by this really annoying owner who really only thinks about money and doesn't understand that to sustain that money, you also have to evolve your menu and stuff. It was heartbreaking, to be honest, because like Favreau is so good at portraying that passion that this character has for making this new menu, for this exciting review that he's going to get, and stressful review, and then he's just broken when he can't do his menu. And I think it's a really cool premise to create that tension that then leads into what the story of the movie is actually going to be.
Yeah, there's a reason I brought up the meta aspect of the movie, because you certainly can see the real life correlation here, where there's like a higher up that Favreau as an artist has to answer to, and has to worry about commercial viability, so to speak, of his food or of his movies, and whatever the case may be. And despite having a level of success, still kind of feeling a little run down and feeling like he has to answer to other people, whether it be the public at large with like this food critic and the opinions on Twitter, or with his boss who's running the show. Like, yeah, he's the head chef, but he's still like not the captain of anything. He's still like beholden to other people. So like you can kind of like, I think it's very interesting for a filmmaker to make that, particularly a filmmaker who's worked with such like the powerhouses of the industry,
and is going to continue to work with the powerhouses of the industry. But
the fact that he's kind of stepping out of those powerhouses in order to make this movie, and then the premise of the movie is that, I think is very interesting. And Dustin Hoffman's a good asshole.
He really is.
Yeah.
Well, and I think in particular with Dustin Hoffman in this movie, the first time when he's saying, you got to play the hits here, buddy, this is how you got here, I can kind of see his argument there. But then when the review went badly, and they start to have to, he has to decide, how am I going to redo this the second time around, and then he still gets told he has to do the same thing again. It's like, oh, you don't Reba didn't have his best interests at heart.
He's just, not that he doesn't have his best interests at heart, it's just that he's a coward and wants to he's afraid to branch out. He's afraid to do, he just wants to play what works, or what he thinks will work, and that's hard to work under if you're an artist like Jon Favreau.
There's definitely a parallel to be had with directors and producers, where sometimes the producer is somebody who really doesn't understand how a story should be, and maybe just asks, just do a sky beam at the end. People like that.
People love a good sky beam.
Yeah.
Our test audience says we need this, so put in this. Yeah.
And maybe sometimes they really don't know what they're talking about, and they should give more creative freedom. And I think to some extent in Marvel as well, whenever they've given more creative freedom, they've had more successful, or better reviewed, at least better considered movies. And I think there's a parallel to be had there.
For sure. And especially with like the general thing being the repression of like let creativity them do more creative things. I mean, especially with, like Josh said, with the, him having worked with these major production companies, it really shines through in this movie as a really like poignant message that if you're just watching it to watch a cooking movie, you might not see that. But I'm really glad you mentioned that, Josh. Simultaneously with the review process, we also get introduced to Carl Casper's family, his ex-wife, played by Sofia Vergara, and his son in the movie, Percy. And this is probably the actual, like, the true message of the movie is all related to his relationship with his son.
This is the narrative through line, for sure. Yeah.
Which, again, watching the initial trailer for the movie, you might think that, the whole thing's going to be about the celebrity chefs, rise and fall and then rise again. And there is some of that, to be sure. But, like, the heart of the movie is his relationship with his son, and to some extent his dynamic with his ex-wife. What do you guys think about, like, the introduction of the son here? Like, I know he went shopping for the groceries, which Hugo really enjoyed. What do you guys think about this at the beginning here?
I mean, smart setup, what this movie will be, because this movie ultimately is a guy reconnecting with his roots, but also kind of like rediscovering what's important, I guess, to put it a little simply. That career-wise, but also work-life balance-wise. Like, in these opening scenes, he's grocery shopping with his kid, but he's kind of like, it's kind of an obligatory, and like there's a very brief montage of him like going to like an amusement park with his kid, and like he's clearly just trying to like get through this quickly.
He's trying to be the cool dad who takes his
Yeah.
son to do stuff, but he's not really in it. He's not in those moments.
And his kid is very poignantly asking, "Hey, can I come be in the kitchen with you? Can I come see what you do?" And he's like, "No, just go away."
Yeah,
and
there's bad language in there, he says, I think.
Right.
It's bad language.
But his kid wants to connect with his dad, and he knows that the way to do that is to connect with him on things that he's passionate about, which is his cooking. So the kid is trying to break in that way, and Carl is not receptive to that, which makes the second half of the movie more poignant.
Well, and it really is a good performance from MJ Anthony, who plays Percy.
Yeah.
Which is, child actors can be really terrible. He actually did, I think, a really great job in this movie, and I think he does a good job of showing how much he wants to be a part of his dad's life, and really captures. I think we all had moments like this as kids where we wanted to do something with our parents, and we're trying to show them that we're interested without coming across as too beggy.
Yeah.
And I think he really nails that because
he really does.
He wants to be a part of it, but as soon as his dad says no, you can see that look of disappointment. But he doesn't press on his dad for more attention.
He's just the right amount of precocious, which is a really hard line to walk for kid actors in particular and for kid characters. But he really, really walks it. And the line that you were just talking about, he walks that too. It's a really good performance, actually.
I think it nails the sort of little bit of precociousness that a lot of children of divorce have.
Yeah.
Not to get too personal, but my parents divorced when I was 7 years old. And my dad works in an artistic field. He's a musician. So to some extent, a chef, you could say, is kind of an artistic field.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely.
At least this movie argues as it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Sure. In a very similar way. And I could see myself a lot in the child, and it felt very personal to me. It really, really hit me in that sense, and you can tell Favreau has been through it, because I think portraying that without having experienced it is really difficult, because it's a strange feeling that is hard to explain to someone who hasn't been a child of divorce, and I really felt it in this movie. I think that's what elevates the movie for me, to be honest.
Well, another thing that really was relevant in these beginning sequences with his son was he gets the review, and it's not a good review. So his son says, "Oh, it went viral. The review's viral on Twitter," and Chef Carl Casper, boomer at heart, does not have a Twitter, so he doesn't even know what it is. Really,
there's several conversations trying to explain Twitter to Jon Favreau's character, which is such a deliciously 2014 kind of thing to happen.
It's really just a little morsel that nestled in time here, where it's possible that he wouldn't have any idea what Twitter is. But his son helps him create this Twitter account, and I think this is one of the things that it's a really small part of the movie, it's a small aspect, but I really like the way they show using cell phones, where you get the bubble in the background that shows what they're typing and all that stuff. I think that movies, especially when they're showing text messages and things like that, they always go about it the same way, and it's I never like it, but this was a cool way to show. It was good, yeah. The scene, a really small aspect of the movie, but I really like that. But the real
that counts.
Heart of this is the impact of social media on Carl Casper's career, and how his complete lack of understanding of how it works is his ultimate downfall here at the beginning.
It tanks him. Yeah, it kind of that's what the inciting incident is really based around him not understanding Twitter and not understanding how the internet works.
Because he challenges the reviewer to a rematch.
Well, before that happens, he sends him what he thinks is a private message that has some very vulgar language in it, and it ends up being not a private message, but just a tweet that he sends out that goes viral. And that leads him to having to challenge him to a rematch, basically.
And that rematch, when he goes back, we've already talked about this, Dustin Hoffman's character demands that they do the same recipe, the same menu again, because we have the most reservations we've ever had. There's no way we're changing it now. And oops. So then Jon Favreau quits the job, but then when the reviewer shows up anyways and gets served all the same crap, he's live tweeting it, and Favreau cannot handle this. Carl Casper, rather. Comes storming back in.
He has a breakdown.
And has a breakdown, which, again, goes viral yet again. I love all this. It's probably, it's awkward funny to see someone have a meltdown like this.
Oh yeah, it's hard to watch. It's like a real melt. It's not like a funny haha meltdown. It's like a ooh yikes kind of meltdown.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I love in the movie how they keep going back to it. Like they show it later on videos that his son is showing on Twitter, and like there's always a new bit that wasn't in the original scene. And I'm sure a lot of it is improv from Favreau. I'm sure that most of it was improv, and I thought it was really good because he just captures that sense of absolute desperation that his
It's
character
molten.
Yeah, he grabs the molten lava cake and just.
And there are multiple moments where he's silent, and you think it's gonna end, and then he explodes again. That always got me. It was good.
Yeah. But this is also a good setup for like later stuff. Like the payoff of all this is good. They're kind of like sneakily setting up chess pieces here with his son and Jon Favreau's relationship to the internet and Twitter, and not letting his son in the kitchen, and kind of keeping his work life and his home life separated. Like these are all chess pieces set up that all come together in the back half. I think is really well done.
And so then the last bit of setup for this movie now is they've hinted at it a few times. I mean, they've stated it, that his ex-wife keeps saying, hey, you should really do this food truck. I think you'd be much happier. You'd be your own boss. And so now that he's blown up his career, he finally goes along with what his ex-wife had suggested and goes to meet with her other ex-husband, played by Robert Downey Jr., to get a food truck. And that whole scene with Robert Downey Jr. was probably the funniest stuff in the movie. Because
it's so awkward.
It's so awkward. I love that like they made him wear booties and stuff. Like there's no reason for that in the movie. It was very, very funny. But he gets the food truck, and then this is where the true narrative of the movie begins for me, where he starts working with his son to clean out the truck and to get it ready to use. And so this is when he finally starts to let his son in.
But before that, we get the scene where his son finally snaps. Like, his son has been, as Josh has pointed out, he's always, or as you were saying, Grizz, I think, where you can tell he's always let down by his dad, but he doesn't want to intrude too much. He doesn't want to push it too much. And then at one point, he's like, I hate this. Why do you hate me? Why do you? And then they have the big fight there. And after that big fight, you can tell that Favreau's character starts to understand that he needs to pay more attention to his son. And then their relationship sort of starts fixing itself.
But so when they're fixing up this truck, one of his coworkers, one of his line cooks, I believe, from the restaurant, and his good friend played by John Leguizamo, comes down to help him, drops everything, drops his career to come join him on this new venture with the food truck. I just wanted to shout out this in particular because I love John Leguizamo's character in this movie. He's another, I kind of like Jon Favreau. John Leguizamo's a guy who rarely gets the lead role in a movie and is in tons of movies. And I think he's kind of an underrated performer overall. And I really love him in this movie because he's the best friend, you know?
Yeah.
You were lamenting in our episode on Mark Wahlberg, John Leguizamo's role in The Happening, and you said, I feel bad for John Leguizamo because he's in so many bad movies, and I said he's also in really good movies though.
You're true.
So he's
you're,
here.
You're right. He's here in a very good movie.
Yes.
But I do usually feel bad for him.
Yeah. No reason to feel bad for him here.
Yeah, no reason to feel bad for him here because he really has a fun character that is so likable and is like, obviously he's not actually related like by blood to Carl Casper, but he's like truly like the best uncle to Percy. We see that as they begin their cross-country road trip, which, is the meat of the movie. It's almost it's not quite a montage because they do spend a good amount of time in each city, but it's montage-esque because they have a similar sort of order of events. They park the truck, they get a bunch of people that show up. The son tweets out, "Hey, come see us here," and each time Carl begins to appreciate how smart his son is and how self-starting that he takes initiative and all that. What do you guys think of the cross-country road trip?
Well, I think you just hit on it there, which is that Carl realizes that his son is savvy in ways that he is not, and in ways that can really help him in the kitchen, and that's something that he was resistant to at the start of the movie. They realized, oh, I was thinking too small and not thinking outside the box, and my son's actually very good at this and could actually, very much help me. And but that's kind of focused more on the chef and career aspect, but also like he was keeping his family life and his work life separated and at the expense of his family life, and he learns that he can let his son into his passions like this, and that they can actually really connect over that, and that's
and fuse his passions.
It's really lovely, and the back half of the movie is really lovely. I want to hear Hugo's thoughts too, but I want to come back to that.
Sure.
Yeah. Everything where they reconnect and they become friends, and he becomes one of the sous chefs in the food truck is just fantastic for me. It's just gives me this really heartwarming feeling, and there's a few little moments that I think are my favorite, which is, for example, before they leave, where he's like, "Oh, can I come to cross country?" And he's like, "Oh, I don't know. This seems like maybe you should ask your mum." Oh, she's okay with it, and they've already done that in the movie, and they show the phone where he's already texted, and her mum is always fine with it because she's just like, you can tell she's always in the background trying to get them to reconnect and for him to find his passion again.
I really like that in particular because frequently with divorce stories, it's always mother versus father.
Yeah.
I really like in this one that she really does want Carl to have a good relationship with their son. So that's that's extra heartwarming.
and you can tell that maybe their relationship sort of ended not because they weren't in love anymore, but just because he probably lost a bit of the passion that he originally had, and then losing the passion for his work sort of made it strenuous in his personal life as well. But she obviously really cares about him. And then later on, when the first time that he realized, oh, you've been tweeting this, when they get to the food truck and he goes shopping with him, and then they come back, and then he's like, oh, who are all these people? How did you get all these people out here? And the kid is like, oh, I did this. I tweeted this. And he just like, and I think he says, oh, you're my new head of marketing. That's really cool. It's just really heartwarming and lovely.
The other thing I really like about this is, if you've ever had a conversation about America and like what makes America great to me, one of the highlights for me all the time whenever discussing America is food. Because the best parts of America for me is that it's a melting pot, that there's people from all over the world that bring all of their cultures and their foods to the United States, and sometimes they get innovated on, and this movie gets to showcase that from like coast to coast for me. And so like you get to see Miami, the Cuban sandwiches. God, I love a good Cuban sandwich.
I've never had one, but they look great.
They're so good.
I'd be into it. I'd be into it.
And then they go through New Orleans, which of course is got all that great Cajun food, and they stop at Café Du Monde to get beignets, which if you ever get the chance, Hugo, highly recommend it. Because I just remember back in my high school French class, my French teacher would always talk about how great the beignets are at Café Du Monde. And I'm like, this sounds like tourist trap stuff. Like, there's no way they're going to be that good. And then they actually were really that good.
How far is New Orleans from Houston, where you grew up?
It's like 4.5 hours, 5 hours, something like that.
Nice.
I don't go to New Orleans nearly often enough, but I have been quite a few times.
Nice.
But and then the highlight of the movie, food-wise for me, is when they stop in Austin and go to Franklin Barbecue, which is one of my favorite barbecue restaurants in the world.
Oh yeah. And
we get to spend some good time here. They even have the owner, Aaron Franklin, is in the movie, and talks to them about the brisket and all that stuff. It's I love that so much. Barbecues, that's my favorite.
And I think a brilliant idea of the movie is the fact that as they travel through America, they evolve the food truck menu to fit in some of the local traditions, and they go look for places where they cook, some of the best local food and sort of incorporate it in their menu. And I think that stuff is always really cool.
These sequences are so much fun.
Yeah.
It's so fun. So I'll bring this up now. So I'm going to take a long walk, but just stay with me and I'll land this plane. Don't worry. for around the time this movie came out, or a little after this movie came out, I spent a lot of time on like screenwriting blogs and like screenwriting subreddits, for example. And in the screenwriting community, you talk about conflict because like that's like the basis of all drama. Is you have to have conflict in every scene and conflict between these characters, blah 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 blah. And like a prompt that comes up a lot on blogs is like, what's a movie that has really little conflict or almost no conflict? And this is like the go-to answer for that question, and it has been the go-to answer for a long time. And like rewatching it this week, there's more conflict than I remember. Like, what I remember is the first act has conflict between him and Dustin Hoffman, him and the critic, and then, like, the next hour is conflictless, basically. That's not quite the case. I think, like, once he gets the food truck around the halfway point, the movie kind of changes tones, but there's still, like, some tension with his son. Hugo, you mentioned, like, the blow-up fight between him and his son. That's after they get the food truck. But
I think it tricks you into thinking there's no conflict, and then at the end it brings it back, also.
But I will say that considering the third act is usually when the conflict all comes to a head in most movies, the third act of this is pretty smooth sailing. And it's mostly just like them in Austin, them in New Orleans, and them being extremely successful and just having a great time. And like the great time is infectious. Like every time when they're in Miami, when they're in New Orleans, when they're in Austin, I'm like, man, I want to go get a sandwich from this place. This looks awesome. Also, I should get a food truck.
Yeah,
I think they're having a great time. they're really making money.
Yeah, the fun is absolutely infectious.
For me, the most infectious part is when the cover of Sexual Healing comes on.
Oh yeah,
and they're singing along. I'm getting into it with them. I'm dancing in my seat. It really is.
Yeah, and his son is just kind of looking at him like, "Dad, you're an old man. Stop it." It's like, it's great.
But something Hugo said earlier that I want to comment on. Hugo, I think you're right on the money with talking about the conflict with Sofia Vergara, the ex-wife character, and how they're not explicit about this, but if you read between the lines, it's pretty easy to see that their marriage likely failed because he lost touch with his passions, and that bled into his personal life. But I also think we can also read between the lines and say that him keeping his work life, his home life separated so much at the expense of his home life also probably contributed to the divorce. And so when this is all resolved later on, it's because he reconnected with his roots and refound his passions for cooking, but also let his son into the kitchen and started to meld his home and his personal life. And that, there's a reason there's not much conflict in the back half of the movie, but the emotional climax is Sofia Vergara accidentally saying "I love you" to Jon Favreau. Yeah, and that's poignant.
That was such a great moment. I love that moment.
It was really nice. It's really nice.
There's also at the end of the movie, like the real resolution, like the final scene in the food truck, you can see her working on the food truck as well.
Do they renew their vows in the credits or anything, or do they like get remarried?
They get remarried.
They get remarried.
Happens right before the credits. Well, I assume she's wearing a wedding dress.
Yes. Yeah. So I think the ending is where they get remarried, but the final scene we see in the food truck is she's working on the food truck. So it's like
it's a family business.
It's sort of representing that idea of melding family and
bringing
work
the whole family together on this one job.
And
so that's
I also like the fact that her character, she's not in the movie a lot, but whenever she is a really positive, nice presence. And I like that she also has a character. She's like this very, very beautiful, well-dressed woman, but she's also a businesswoman, and she's also willing to, put on a shirt and work on a food truck. I like that they portray this character in a way that isn't stereotypical. I really enjoy that.
And she really does, to your point that she's smart and business savvy, like the movie does make a point to show that Jon Favreau in the first half is being a blockhead, and like he wants to do things his way and be, a self-starter and self-sustaining, and that's one of many reasons he doesn't want his son in the kitchen. But like the back half of the movie works, the whole precipice of the back half of the movie is because he accepts help from his ex-wife's ex-husband. Like she's like, you need to go talk to him, you need to accept help from somebody, and he does. And that
he sort of gets over
ends
himself,
up happily after.
and,
Ends up happily ever after because of it.
So the happily ever after, they finally, when they get to Los Angeles, he tells his son that hey, we're not going to be able to do this anymore, and that's really sad, and that's a huge bummer. But then he goes back to his house and is sitting there, and everything begins to click, and he calls his son and says, hey, as long as your mom's okay with it, and you do your schoolwork and all that. So
what he does is he watches the video, because
he watches
earlier in the movie, his son mentions that, I've been taking 1-second videos every day for this whole trip, and he's like, what are you going to do with that? I'm just going to make a video at the end. And it's sort of brushed aside, it's not really talked about. And then when he gets home and he's alone, he watches the whole video, and he's reminded of all the good memories that he's had, and that's why he decides to call his son and ask him to work on the food truck when he can.
And we finally get that moment, the connection that he's going to now have with his son. They're going to have a healthy father-son relationship, which is awesome. And they have a huge group of people at the food truck. And who should show up but the food critic from the beginning of the movie? And he tells him, I can't review you because I want to go into business with you.
I want to back you.
I want to back you. And I personally, I love Oliver Platt. Again, another actor.
Oh yeah, he's great.
Is a great, supporting actor.
I also like that. Like early on, it's a blink and you miss it line, but at some point they mentioned that this food blogger sold his blog to AOL for like $10 million.
Yeah.
So like he's now independently wealthy. So like the fact they bring this back, and he's like, yeah, I want to put that into you. That's cool.
Yes,
it's a really good movie at planting things that always get a payoff.
Yes, and it's immensely satisfying.
Yes,
given the conflict between these two characters in the front half of the movie, to have it come back around like that is very, very satisfying.
I love the quote. It's like, you picked a fight with me. I buy ink by the barrel, buddy. Why would you pick a fight with me? I wouldn't challenge you to a cook-off.
Yeah. And it's like, and you can tell that the fight at the beginning was more with himself, where he was in his life, rather than the critic. Like, the critic is just like an externalization of that.
There's a lesser version of this movie where that scene ends with Jon Favreau telling the critic to F off.
Yeah.
And like that's the payoff of the setup. But it's reconciliation is so much more cathartic than getting someone to go F themselves. That can also be cathartic, but in this case,
in this case, it really does pay
reconciliation for this movie. Reconciliation was 100% the way to go, and it works really well.
Because that's the theme of the whole movie: reconciliation with his son, reconciliation with his ex-wife, reconciliation with this critic he didn't even know.
The point is that he was in a bad place in the front half of the movie when he had this conflict with the critic, and in some ways, the critic was like correct,
Yeah.
And so he found himself.
Yeah. And so then the critic says, I want to open a restaurant with you. So they open the restaurant, and then we close on the restaurant. I'm assuming post-wedding ceremony where Sofia Vergara and Jon Favreau have remarried, and the whole family's together. It's just, it's cheesy, but just so nice.
It's nice. It's cheesy, but tasty.
Yes.
I think I said this before in the podcast about other movies, maybe about Paddington, I guess, but it's very hard to make a really heartwarming movie that toes the line of cheesiness without going overboard and being really cheesy. And I really appreciate it when it happens.
So
good movie.
Great movie, in my opinion. I did have a couple other questions. Do you guys want to do those?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
One question I have whenever I watch this movie, or whenever I get someone to watch this movie, is I want to know, do you like to cook, or do you like cooking shows?
I love food. I love going to different restaurants. I love trying different styles of cuisines that I've never had before. I love trying to make recipes by myself, which sometimes work, sometimes they don't, but I really do enjoy cooking. I find it really cathartic. And cooking shows as well is something that I've always watched with my mom. That's whenever we were alone and, having lunch together, that's what our go-to usually. So, yeah. So this kind of hit home for me.
I also really love to cook. I wish I was better at it. I'm okay, but I wish I was better at it. Like, I watch this, I'm like, man, I wish I could just
be that good.
Do that. Yeah, I wish I could do that.
I guess I'm despite the accent, I am Italian, so there's a base level of goodness that it's hard not to be. I guess everybody knows how to make.
I'm guaranteed to be a good cook.
It's kind of true though. Like most people
I
know
buy that.
can make some good, decent food.
Hugo, I've never been to your. I've never been to your country, but I plan to one day just do like a food tour of Italy and just build a vacation entirely around eating places where you live.
Awesome.
So
I highly recommend that. When I went to Italy as a kid, we went to all the sites, and I saw all the sites as a kid. When I went back in college,
I don't
was
care.
Like,
Yeah.
you guys go look at the Pantheon. That's great and all that. I'm gonna go to this restaurant.
Yeah.
I've never really watched cooking shows, but I think I was listening to another podcast recently, and they talked about how cooking shows have become like such a comfort for a lot of people, and they didn't really take off till. Okay, back up. I was listening to a podcast episode about Julie and Julia, the movie about a blogger in New York in like 2002. So like 9/11 is like kind of in the background of that movie. And this podcast argued that cooking shows really took off post 9/11 because it was like something that was like communal but also calming, and
it's comfort food.
Yeah. I mean, cooking shows themselves are comfort food. I've never really watched them, but I like that people like them. I like that like they're kind of like becoming a pretty outsized part of the culture now with like Great British Bake Off and the Bon Appetit Test Kitchen and Rachel Ray. Like they're a big deal, and I feel like they're only getting bigger.
Yeah, my dad and I have my dad lives with me half the year, and whenever he's in town, like whenever we can't decide what we want to watch on TV, we flip over to the Food Network because there's almost always an episode of Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives on, and, and we watch that all the time. So I'm a fan of cooking shows, but more so I'm a fan of the connection that you feel with other people with cooking.
Yeah,
and the cooking shows provide that as well, a mutual appreciation for what is being prepared on the show. So the reason I always want to know that is like, do you think that affects your ability to like this movie, or like can you be a huge fan of this movie whether you like cooking at all?
I don't know. I think you can, just because the movie is so well made in the sense of what we were talking about before. It's so good at being heartwarming. But I certainly think that if you're into food, if you're into trying different foods, this movie has something more to it that you wouldn't get.
I agree. I think this is a movie that you can really like, even if you don't care about the food aspect at all, because the narrative is so good. But if you do like food, really like food, then this gets bumped up a notch.
Yeah, but the passion is the point,
right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
The you care because he cares, and that's how kind of how movies work. Is it gets you to care about stuff you don't think you care about because the characters care. I mean, I like cooking, but I'm kind of indifferent on cooking shows personally. But like this movie really works for me.
And the last thing I wanted to ask was that I'm not a child of divorce. We talked about this. Hugo is. I love this movie as it is. But I am curious. Like, does it hit harder? For you, Hugo.
For me, it does. Like for me, the emotional side of the movie, aside from how fun it is, how heartwarming it is, but the emotional side of the movie with the divorce stuff really hits home, and it's. I don't know. It's never this smooth. As speaking from experience and from people I know, it's just that's not how. It's very rare that it's how it is in real life. But it's sort of wish fulfillment for me. It felt like a sort of a fantasy of what maybe could have been. Because unfortunately, my situation wasn't as smooth and didn't reconnect in the same way. But
it's pretty neat and tidy.
It is, but there's some it's really cathartic in that sense as well. Like it also like because the conflict at the beginning feels really authentic, and you can tell whoever wrote this and Favreau himself have been through this and understand this dynamic between father and son in a divorce. Then the payoff doesn't feel too neat and tidy, as you say, because the beginning is so authentic that it does feel earned. Yes, because you can tell these people understand that dynamic, even though it is wish fulfillment.
Yeah, I mean, what's clear is that their divorce happened because he was a broken man, not because their marriage was necessarily broken, but like him being broken led to their marriage being broken. And so it took him fixing himself to fix the marriage. And so like because him fixing himself is satisfying, the rekindling of the marriage is also satisfying. It doesn't feel too saccharine at that point, but that's why it's neat and tidy, is because it's very clear that the problem with them was the problem with him. So fix one, fix both.
Well, so that brings me to my last question, which, based on our conversation, it feels like a silly question, but I'll ask it anyways. Do you think this movie is anything special? I'm thinking because, like, when you compare it to a lot of the other movies we've looked at, Doctor Strangelove, Silence of the Lambs, Lawrence of Arabia, Citizen Kane, all these, movies that are like cinematic, like in moments in time. Is this special in any sort of similar way to those?
I mean, it's not going to be high on the list when you're comparing it to those kinds of movies,
sure,
which I think is totally fair. No one expects it to be ranked among those. But yes, it's special just because, like, you don't see these a lot anymore. Because, it took Jon Favreau making 2 Iron Man movies and shepherding in a new era of big budget filmmaking in order to get the funding for this. So, if Jon Favreau only gets to make one of these out of every 6 enormous movies he makes, and obviously these don't get made very often, so that it kind of makes it special in that sense. The fact that it came out in 2014 and not 1977, that makes it special.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I also think again that it's hard to do, especially in the sense that it's difficult to do heartwarming to this extent and just fun and to some extent, as Josh was saying, not have a lot of conflict in it and still make a movie that feels worthwhile and that you really enjoy watching. It's kind of hard to do, and I don't think there's that many of them. Because like even a lot of comedies that are really funny are maybe they're funny because they have shock value. They're funny because they're absurd. This is the sense of fun in this is very grounded. It doesn't rely on punching down on anyone or anything, and it's just really infectious, and I think in that sense, it's not something that we see very often.
The other thing that I think makes this sort of a special movie, that, like I said, kind of a unique moment in movie history, is that when you see movies that feature chefs so prominently, or TV shows that are about fictionalized chefs, they tend to skew towards the Gordon Ramsay style, the yelling, the angry, the yes chef, the militaristic, and this isn't that. This is the fun side of cooking.
Well, he's kind of like that in the first half hour, which is the bad. He shouldn't be like this. That's
exactly.
the bad time.
So I think that there's something to be said for that, and especially I don't know if cooking movies is exactly a genre, but
no, I was going to say, is this the best cooking movie? It's basically this or Burnt, the Bradley Cooper vehicle,
which is terrible.
No, the best cooking movie. I'm sorry. The best cooking movie is Ratatouille.
And I was going to say, Ratatouille does
true.
usually top the lists for best cooking movie as well. But again, it has the same sort of deal. The catharsis of the movie is that cooking is fun, and not supposed to be
anyone can cook,
militaristic, and
yes.
But yeah, so I mean, Ratatouille. There's this Burnt, which, like I said, is just not good. It's just not good. But I haven't seen a whole bunch of other chef movies. But when I was, one of the things that came to mind was Masters of None, which is a TV show on Netflix. Aziz Ansari. There's a part where he learns how to make pasta, and it's
in Italy.
In Italy, and it's the same sort of deal where it's like the fun. So like that's what I'm saying. In the overall pantheon, I just think that there needs to be more of this.
Yeah, I agree.
But yeah, so
really
let's rank this film to remember. I don't think it's going to be in our top 10. Should I read the top 10 anyways?
Yeah, sure. I don't care.
Top 10, number 10, The Thing. 9, Mulholland Drive. 8, Lawrence of Arabia. 7, The Departed. 6, Boogie Nights. 5, Shaun of the Dead. 4, Paddington 2. 3, Silence of the Lambs. 2, Dr. Strangelove. And 1, Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
And if you hear those 10 and think that Chef should be among those 10, you're lying. Get out of here. No disrespect, but you're lying.
So
anyway, for me, it's number 1.
Yeah, you're lying.
Where would it be for you, Hugo, overall on our list?
I would put it at around, I think, number 22. Yeah, just below Ansandi and above Rudy. It's the usual thing with the list where, I kind of like another round, for example, this movie on our list that I like more, but based on our list.
Read the things that you have ahead of it. Read the things you have ahead of it. From 11 on down. 11 on down.
Oh, read 11 down.
So ahead of it, I would have Citizen Kane, It's a Wonderful Life, Chinatown, Your Name, Wind Rises, John Wick, Network, Sound of Metal, Bicycle Thieves, Jackie Brown, and Incendie.
And then you put Chef.
And then I would put Chef.
And then he put Chef there. And then we have Rudy, 127 hours, and that's where I put Chef, is right after 127 hours.
And then we have Batman Mask of the Phantasm, Another Round, Mank, Trial of Chicago 7, The Matrix Reloaded, and then that's where I put it, which is right above Space Jam, Slither, and Iron Man 3 is where I have it. So I have it at 29. Jeff has it, Grizz has it at 24. What?
24.
24. And Hugo has it 22.
So that
which averages out to
25.
Math. All right,
so
math.
We're going to have it right above Another Round in the 25 spot. Congratulations, Chef.
So all our Danish listeners will be very mad at us.
Yeah. So it's ahead of Trial of Chicago 7, Mank, and Another Round, and right behind Rudy, 127 Hours, and Batman Mask of the Phantasm. Cool.
So that's our rankings. I really hope that everyone who listened to this enjoyed our discussion of it, but I also really hope you enjoyed Chef, because it is a heartwarming movie.
God, I'm hungry now.
Yeah,
God.
I'm gonna go have lunch right now.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll go order a Cuban sandwich.
That sounds nice.
Cubano.
So first, Josh, where can people find you on the internet?
Find me on Twitter at @TheSloopJoshB, and on YouTube, Movies I Love, So Can You. I got something in the works on that, so
okay. So
subscribe or whatever.
Subscribe now, so that
Hit
you're
that
not
bell.
blindsided by whatever's in the works. Hugo, where can people find you?
You can find me at Hugo_Pinay on Twitter and Hugo Pinay on Letterboxd, I think. Yeah.
And you can find me at Good Game Grizz on Twitter and Good Game Grizz on Twitch. I haven't been streaming a whole lot recently, but I do intend to be getting back into that here soon. So make sure to follow us in all those respective places.
And the podcast at RTF_pod.
RTF_pod. If you would
What
please
are we doing
follow us
next
there.
week?
Next week, we are going to be watching License to Kill, the James Bond movie. Timothy Dalton's second turn as James Bond.
Can we give a little insight on how we chose it?
Yeah, well, go ahead, Hugo. How
We were just like, a Bond movie is coming out. We can do a Bond movie. And we were like, what's a Bond movie that people don't talk about a lot? And it was like, License to Kill? Sure, let's do License to Kill. So we're doing that one.
Well, and my reason for why License to Kill in particular was because Hugo and I are both big fans of Timothy Dalton's performance in Hot Fuzz.
Yes.
So we're like, yeah, well, why not? Let's pick a Bond movie because, of course, No Time to Die is coming out.
I'm seeing it on Tuesday.
And so, we figured let's get a little Bond going. Unfortunately, Josh won't be with us next week, but he'll be joining us the week after that. Once again.
I'll be in Hawaii.
Yeah, so he has a good excuse.
Poor Josh.
Suck it, guys. Be eating all kinds of poke. I'll be neck deep in poke this time next week.
God, that sounds good too.
All right, well, that's going to do it for this week's episode of Remember the Film. Please join us again next time, and we really enjoyed having you. Bye-bye.
Bye.